Welcome to Showcase Broadcast Studios. My name is Michael Wardy. I'm a certified financial planner and regional director at Source Advisors, where we are working with our clients on various tax incentive programs to help them increase cash flow. This morning, I am really excited to invite Christine into the studio, virtually to the studio. Christine is with PuzzleHR, and we are going to be talking about one of the hottest topics, I think, in more recent years, and it's the war on talent. So Christine, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me today, Michael. Super excited to talk about this topic that is on every business owner's mind today, it seems like.
It's crazy because every single day I talk to people, and the constant question and comment is, hey, if you know anyone, do you know anyone? Help us out. We need employees. And I don't get why they can't. So that's what I'm going to ask you as one of our questions. But Christine, before we get started, can you just give us the audience, and thank you everyone for joining on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, for joining us live this morning. If you do have questions or comments, please share those in your whichever venue you're watching this on. Share those so that we can continue conversations. If you do have questions, we will get to those. Hopefully, if not, we will get to those after and follow up with you. So Christine, tell me, I almost spilled my water. Tell us a little bit about PuzzleHR.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So PuzzleHR, we are a managed human resource provider. We are agnostic and neutral when it comes to technology. So many of our peers in the marketplace their HR support is driven by a technology suite of services or some sort of health insurance or workers' comp type of service. We are truly agnostic. And our benefit is we help our clients with everything from administration of day-to-day HR tasks. So really alleviating the burden from employers and C-level professionals, all the way through sitting at that C-level executive table and working with the C-suite on helping match their business goals with their biggest asset and sometimes their biggest liability, their employees. So really changing the way that businesses view HR, which we're seeing is becoming more and more important with some of the newer generationals, the millennials, Gen Y, Gen Zs coming into the work environment where they really truly value culture, work-life balance, et cetera. So helping business owners manage HR from the tactical to the strategic. And that's, we're changing the industry a little bit here at Puzzle Human Resources.
Perfect. I love it. Okay. So the great shift, the war on talent, the Great Resignation. What is this all about?
Yeah. So we knew that there was going to be a change coming prior to the pandemic, right? With Gen Y and Gen Z entering the workforce and their relationship with the working environment. What the pandemic did was it really sped up a lot of that change. So we lost, obviously millions of workers throughout the pandemic. And what the pandemic did was it gave everybody time to think about what they really wanted in life, right? The commute time, their work-life balance, really think about what was going to be important with what they wanted moving forward. So as we saw a lot of people exiting the workforce through COVID, not through their own necessarily desires, they were at home, they were with their families, they were working on their passion projects, and this gave them time to think. We also look at major metropolitan cities where you had a massive shift in outpouring of employees going out to the suburbs. We take a look at New York City, where I am, right? New York City was fueled by theater, right? Fueled by actors and dancers. It supported the economy. It was a big driver to the workforce. And what happened? The pandemic came and, hospitality, Broadway, all of these venues had shut down. So people moved. And some of them just aren't plainly coming back to these major cities. You also have some of the, the big talent that were in these major cities opening up their own businesses and establishments outside in the suburbs now as well. So you have the time, right, and thinking of the employees of where they were and what they want moving forward. And then you also literally have a physical exodus out of major metropolitan areas. So that really started the war on talent, or the Great Resignation, the Great Shift, if that's what we want to call it. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about this, and this great shift out of major metropolitan areas. And I'm seeing that a lot when I talk to, because we work a lot with CPA firms throughout the country. They're seeing that they can have their office in New York, but they could have employees in Montana. It just doesn't matter anymore. And it's kind of an interesting shift in the mindset in all that.
Absolutely. I mean, so many clients we're working with now had, 90% of their employees surrounding their office. And now they have 20 or so different states that they're in. So it really is shifting the way that businesses have to, deploy their human capital management, but it's also changing how we do business. I mean, Michael, I'm in New Jersey, right? You're you're nowhere near New Jersey. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we might not have been connected because the how we met was through virtual networking, right? And through our resources. So we even look at the way that business is being conducted. It is completely different today than what it was prior to the pandemic. It's really interesting. So you are correct.
Yeah, and I know I have friends of mine that they continue to work virtually, but one person that I know, he and his family rented an RV and they've just been driving around the country. And he goes, why can't I? Everything's virtual anyway. And I get to see the country at the same time. It's just a completely different mindset. And I know for manufacturers, you need to be physically there. There's certain businesses that you can't do virtually, obviously. What from your perspective and what PuzzleHR is seeing, what industries are you seeing most impacted by this?
I mean, every industry is being impacted, right? So we do have the blue collar industries where people who have been potentially, overworked, right? Working crazy hours, whether you're retail, hospitality, third shift manufacturing, again, those things slow down. So they got to be back home and reevaluate what they were. So the blue collar industries are suffering tremendously, right? With acquiring talent. And this is where we really talk about important culture. My good friends, the Doobie brothers who you had on your show a few weeks ago, really talk about, the 4-day work week and creating flexibility. So even if you are a manufacturer, there are things that we can help you implement so that you can continue to provide flexibility, even though you do need physical bodies in those seats. We also look at, a mass exodus when it comes to different demographics in the workforce. There's a lot of studies that are being conducted about diversity, equity and inclusion. And you have some demographics of employees that are just refusing to come back because they were in a less hostile environment as they were working from home. So they're not going back to these hostile work environments. And that's a really interesting point when we start to break down the statistics with diversity in the workplace and the drive for many people wanting to stay out of those environments. And then, we look at the statistics from the pandemic as well. And we were talking about industries. We look at, and this will allude to every industry, right? I have very, white collar, high paying professional industries that are experiencing shortage on talent because some of the people have realized it's worth a pay cut versus working and being driven 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day, and missing my life outside of that environment. So we are seeing across the board, whether you are blue collar or white collar, whether you're a widget maker or in the finance industry, difficulties recruiting and retaining some talent. We had different studies show different things, right? It's anywhere from, 1 million to almost close to 3 million women have left the workforce. And it depends upon the sites that you look at, will give you different numbers, but a dramatic amount of women have left the workforce. And when we look at, that impacts obviously every industry as well. Women made up almost 50% of the workforce prior to the pandemic, not the case today. It's really, it's something that employers really need to think about as they're looking at rebuilding their employee headcount, right? I mean, they left because of, obviously pay inequality, right? I mean, if there still were not pay inequality issues, we wouldn't have seen the dramatic difference of women versus men leaving the workforse when it came down to the traditional caregiving responsibilities. Right. So there's still that traditional caregiving responsibility that's placed on the, women in the workforce with pay inequality. I mean, unfortunately, many women were forced out and they're not returning because they still need that flexibility because we still have some insecurities when it comes to schooling and what's going to happen with the pandemic. And again, during the pandemic, we've just had a lot of time to really think about what's important to our personal mission and vision and values, not just a corporate's mission, vision, and values.
it's a really good point. And the idea of this work-life balance, which has been around and talked about for so long, I feel like it's coming to reality now. People are truly, not just the employees are saying, hey, we want our employees to have work-life balance. Employees are stepping up and saying, we deserve and we want work-life balance, and we're not going to just wait for you to do it. We have the flexibility to, if you don't do it, we're going to go somewhere else.
Yep.
And that's a huge challenge. And when we were talking, when you mentioned about the four-day work week, about giving that flexibility and helping to keep them in, but more important for these businesses is keeping their top talent in their company, because they're worth everything. How are they doing? How do you guys help your clients maintain, retain, and really just keep and grow top talent? What are you guys doing to help them with that?
Yeah, that's great. Great questions, Michael. And there's a few points I want to make to this. One, it's, we look at, again, the newer generation, the Gen Y, the Gen Z, 35% of the workforce, they want that flexibility. Mm-hmm. And one thing that's changed, and it's really interesting because I hear a lot of, when I was a partner at the firm, or a newbie at the firm before I was a partner, I had to work 7 days a week. I had to work 13, 14 hours, right? We hear that a lot. But 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we weren't connected to our work as much as we are today. We are all so connected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to our work. It's on our cell phones. It's on our LinkedIn. We're getting our emails to our homes. So it's shifted, right? And while the mentality of, okay, it's 8 o'clock at night, I'm sending you an email, a lot of employers have the expectation that their employees will respond, to be quite honest, and especially if you're in our service-based industry, right? You better get back to that client. There's not a lot of boundaries surrounding that. So the mentality, again, of the flexibility of what the newer generations are looking for is, I'm tied to my phone 24/7. Whether I answer an email at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it really doesn't matter as long as I'm responding and meeting my deadlines and my quality of work is the same. So we have to really look at production and how managers are looking at production. And I use the word managers because there is a big difference between your mid-level manager versus mid-level leaders, right? Leaders are going to be able to manage that production and that communication a lot more efficiently than managers who are just used to measuring butts and seats. And that's a big shift that we're talking about. So you asked how we were doing this by helping mid-level managers truly understand how to measure productivity and how to lead, not necessarily by sitting across the table and counting how many people are in their seats at their desk that day, but how do we really truly measure the production, the quality, and the efficiency of the work that's being delivered, and is it on time? So helping managers lead through that, which will help create that flexibility in the work environment that everybody wants today. Big thing. Another big tip that we're finding that is working out with our employers is, quote unquote, rehiring your employees, right? Mm-hmm. Having these reviews, potentially giving retention bonuses in this environment. Because to your point, Michael, it's going to cost you as a business owner a lot less to retain that employee than to have to go out and recruit and hire and onboard and train a new one.
No doubt. That's the thing is, it seems like the employers no longer have control. It seems like, from what I'm hearing, the employees are just saying, I'm worth more, not just from a financial perspective. That does help, obviously, but it's more of just a overall global life experience. So given that, there's a plan for retaining. Here's the biggest challenge that I hear. How do you attract? How do you get employees in? How do you do it now? It's not that easy anymore.
No, it is not. And you are correct. Talent is driving the marketplace. And, studies are showing that it's going to be at least 5 years where there's going to be more of a demand for jobs than people, I don't want to say entering the workforce, but that there's a big talent shift for 5 years. So this isn't just as we're recovering from COVID conversation. This is a true cultural and business shift. And I'm often, businesses that aren't willing to shift are going to unfortunately have a tremendous issue with talent. So recruitment is very tight these days. So let's talk about a few best practices. One, and I want to say culture is driving everything. And as a business owner and as a C-level executive, you need to drive your culture and not let your employees drive your culture. And that does take a lot of leadership development, education to start to drive the culture message from the top down versus the bottom up. And it's extremely important. And we are seeing retention rates higher in businesses that have a true culture and people feel connected to each other. So, big things for recruitment is the passion and your purpose, right? Whenever you're having a manager or somebody do an interview with an employee, they've got to be passionate about the purpose. They've got to be connected to your mission, vision, and values, right? And that employee and that potential candidate needs to feel your passion. So a true connection to the purpose of whatever the business is doing is imperative for all the people that are going to be touching the candidates to truly emphasize, and not to be fake, because people can read through fakeness, but be genuinely excited about the work that they're doing and that purpose. Very basic tactile things that businesses can do. You got to respond to employees quickly when they apply. Like, you can't wait 2 or 3 days to apply. You've got to respond quickly. You've got to get them in the process of going through that interviewing stage. And if you think you like somebody, you got to jump on that offer. From a marketing perspective, the traditional job ads, they're not working anymore. You got to make an advertisement for your company. Why do people want to work there, right? If your company's been recognized as a top 10, top 100 performer in your city, highlight that. If you offer flexibility, highlight that. I think the flexibility and the opportunity to have that is going to be the number one driver for recruitment and retention of employees. They're all looking for that. Yeah. And again, that's to our point, right? Whether we do a 3-day work week, a 4-day work week, maybe you get to choose a few flex days if you are in an environment where you need to be a butt in a seat, right? Having some sort of flexibility still so that people have control of their own lives, I think is going to be really important. But you've really got to add, you got to put your company out there like an advertisement. You've got to research what words are trending right now from a search perspective, from an employee and a potential talent perspective. That is huge. And making sure that as we're using this technology and as there's search engines, that your wording is aligning with what people are actually looking for. So quickness to respond to employees, have an attractive job posting, have everybody that touches that candidate be enthusiastic about the company, act quick, and then, be genuine in your efforts when you're recruiting. So is this a magic wand? No. But we need to highlight the benefits. There is a true connection of benefits, and we're not just talking health insurance and 401k. We're talking all of the extra benefits and the soft benefits that employers should be putting in place today to attract and retain their employees.
So was this shifting even before COVID?
Yes.
Man, I did not see that.
Yeah.
And I'm not a hiring person. I don't hire, but still, there was not much of a conversation until we started to come back into the office that I feel like there's more and more people talking about it. It's tough, especially on top of it, you're trying to you're trying to just run your business.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot for employers to digest. And, I think that's why you see some of the technology companies, having a little bit more success for recruitment, because they've been catering to the Gen Y and the Gen Zs for years prior to the pandemic, right? Everybody wants to go work for Google. Everybody wants to work for Facebook, right? Everybody wants to work for, Amazon, maybe not, Amazon's also a hot place to work. So you look at pre-pandemic and the perks that they offered pre-pandemic, right? Are aligning with what people want today. And a lot of the generations that are, the Gen Y, the Gen Zers, they used COVID as a time. Again, we go back to production. They proved their case that they don't need to be in the office, 5 days a week for 40 hours a week to be able to be productive. Actually, a lot of studies show that production actually went up with virtual environments. So it's really interesting when we think about that, why people want people back in the office. Yeah. And, there's ways to collaborate, virtually. There's ways to collaborate with a hybrid environment. It doesn't all have to be, at the water cooler.
It's true. It's true. So we did have a question come up. Yeah. How is diversity, equity, and inclusion driving hiring today?
I mean, that's a loaded question, and we probably could do a whole, series on that. But thank you.
We have to have a part 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, candidates that are leaving their current position because they just felt that they were in an unsafe environment for whatever reason. I think if you are looking to really to take this program seriously, you need to know where you are today and get a pulse for how your culture feels today. We're seeing employee resource groups become a really big part of the hiring process for groups that are focusing on an initiative to create more diversity within their organization. And basically what that is their peer run groups, right? So whether you have a Latino, whether you have an LGBTQ plus community group, whether you have a mothers group or a single working moms group. And what we're seeing is some of these groups are being added as resources during the interviewing process. So if you do have a candidate, and again, we're not being biased, but you want to, you can let your candidates know that your organization supports, ERGs and, provide them potentially even an opportunity to have a conversation with one of the leaders of those employee resource groups. We are seeing employers starting to really grab onto the idea of blind interviewing, which is really where you have a third party really take out some of the things from a resume that might, kind of, whether it's age, whether it's a name, whether it's where they live, where you have a third party service that really removes any demographic information, and you are not measuring based upon a resume anymore. You're really interviewing based upon skill set. And it's not driven by where did you go to school and tell me, about why you left your last employer. It's truly just driving through skill set, and eliminating some of those questions. And of course you're meeting the person face to face and you're not wearing a blindfold. That's not what we mean by blind interviewing. But when candidates are presented, I had somebody say, how can I interview somebody without ever seeing them? I'm like, that's not what we're saying. The people that, it's really funny. The people that are doing the interviewing are passed along candidates based upon skill set match and not resume match. So it seems to make sense.
Yeah. This is great, Christine. So where does, one last question, and I appreciate you joining me this morning. Where does PuzzleHR fit into the whole equation? Where do they drop in?
We are doing everything for our clients. We do help with talent recruitment and talent acquisition. We do a lot of talent management strategy, right? So, helping employers know who's their, who are competent, stable people that are going to be with you forever, no matter what, versus those people that are at risk. I think that's really important for managers to understand to how to identify employees at risk. Talking a lot about retaining your employees, right? Putting in place frequent engagement programs, frequent surveys. I was talking to this about the other day. Again, we're all on social media, right? We want to know, we're going to be checking how many likes did we get on this? How many shares did we be getting on this, right? Because it's instant gratification. The same can go with our relationship with our employees. So helping our employers put in programs that provide that instant gratification and that monthly small review process that also helps with the review at the end. Showing employees appreciation and how we could do that, creating programs around that. Creating programs around flexibility, right? So we're fitting in it in all areas of the employer and the employee life cycle. We can help from that, that recruitment, and we need to attract more candidates all the way through. And unfortunately, we've seen also a shift where employees are realizing the right people are not necessarily in the right seats. So what do we do about that? Because now that we've lost some of the fat that supported those people because they're not coming back to the office, we've realized that they are incompetent to do their job. So figuring out what to do with those employees as well, which is a little different than the conversation we started off with, right? But employers are struggling with the right people in the right seats right now as well, because some of them have been trimmed from the organization.
And I will say that in relation to what you just said, it used to be that, if you're not doing a good job, it wasn't, let's see if they're in the right position. It was get rid of them. We'll get somebody else.
Yes.
And they probably were letting people go that were actually very strong, just not in the current position they were in.
Yeah.
So I think I know that's important to make sure that employee is in the right position. If they're not, shift them around until you realize they're just not in the right business or the industry. Yeah.
And unfortunately, where we see a lot of that? The mid-level managers, right? People who were really good at their job and were really good at, sales or writing those, doing underwriting for an insurance company, really good at their job. And because they were really good at their job, they were promoted to managers, right?
Yeah.
They have no management skill sets or the EQ. And, in a lot of these mid-sized businesses, there are not resources to be able to train those managers. So we see a lot of managers being in the wrong seat. And to your point, it's not that they weren't great, but then they get this, the business then looks at their performance as a manager and they're like, well, you're not doing really well here. And to your point, instead of shifting them back into that maybe a producer role or that, another role, they just work them out of the business as a manager because you're a good manager. So we go back to leadership, we go back to development, we go back to mid-level companies, really, mid-level managers being the cornerstone of a company. But yeah, that's exactly correct.
That makes sense. All right. Christine, thank you again. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you were able to join. For those out there that joined us this morning, thank you again. Share this with anybody and everybody that you know that needs some insight and some additional guidance on how to manage your company and your team, your employee team. Christine, before we go, any parting thoughts?
No, Michael, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on your show today. This was super fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I appreciate everything that you do, for me and for your clients as well. So thanks so much for having me. And if anybody needs anything, feel free to reach out. We're always here to help. And thanks to all the viewers.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Christine, have a great rest of your day as well.
Thank you. You too.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.